Okay, welcome to the last section of Chapter 2, 2.8. We're going to graph two variable inequalities, right? So, yeah, an inequality, if you don't know what that word is, just means instead of having like an equal sign, like equations have equal signs, inequalities have like the greater than, the less than, or greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. It has one of those symbols. So our goal is to graph with two variables. So it's pretty much going to be the x and y. And we're going to graph them in a coordinate plane. Okay, so quick introduction to this. I do think this is pretty useful to review what does it mean when you graph with a single variable. Okay, so if you have a single variable like just x, you would graph it, generally speaking, you would graph this x greater than 3 on a number line, right? So we would just have, say, like 0 and then 1, 2, 3, right there, here's 4, there's 2, blah, 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 blah. And if you remember that when you graph these, there's two different types of dots. If it is no equal to, you have a open dot, and if it was like greater than or equal to, you draw a solid dot. Okay, so for this particular one, we draw an open dot at 3, and then we would go greater than that, so we'd want to go like 4, 5, 6. So we'd shade all the numbers going that way. All right, so the process for two variables is going to be very, very similar to this, except we're going to be using the coordinate plane. Okay, and just, I'm not sure if students are always aware of this. Here's what we're going to do today, two variables, x and y. And so realistically, all you do is you take a single number line, right? But then we need another one because we have two variables and you slap them together. So if I take this other number line and turn it vertical, move it down here to make it the y-axis, that's really what we're doing with two variables, is just two number lines combined together, which basically makes this coordinate plane. All right, so how we actually do this with two variables, right? This was a single variable example. Now we've got two variables with x and y. We are just going to graph like it's an equation, all right? And then we're going to shade above or below the line, much like we shaded left or right. You know, back on this single variable, we'd shade either to the right or to the left. We're going to shade either above or below the line. All right, so let's do this. So in theory, you know how to do this already. So try graphing this like it's a line, right? Draw a coordinate plane. Yeah, you might want to take your notes actually on graph paper, or you could also do your homework on graph paper too. Okay, so pause the video, graph it. All right, I'm back with you. So we have a y-intercept of 4. That's what this number does here. And then the slope is down 3 over 1. So I'm going down 3, right 1, down 3, right 1. Okay, and so before I draw the line here, here's one of the differences for graphing an inequality versus an equation, right? So what happens is, much like we draw an open solid dot or an open dot, right? In the single variable, we might draw an open dot or a solid dot. What that looks like here is if you have a greater than or less than without the equal to part, you're going to draw a dashed line when you graph, right? Because the points on that line do not count. Much like when you have an open dot, that point does not count in your solution set. All right, and then if you have an equal to part of it, you draw a solid line. Okay, so I mentioned that here because this is just a greater than symbol. So when I draw my line, I actually want to draw a dashed line because the points on the line do not represent actual answers. Okay, so I'm going to draw here a line through those points like normal, but I'm going to draw dashed because those points on the line do not count for this inequality. Okay, then the final step is, do we want to shade above or below the line? All right, and so how that works is if we have something that's greater than or greater than or equal to, we go above the line. Okay, and if we have a less than or less than or equal to, we go below. Okay, and it kind of makes sense here. Like, if we think about this is saying y is really big. We want big y values because the mouth is eating y. So all the really big y values are the ones where y is high. So we want to go up here high in the high y value. So in this case, we just shade above here. Okay, and all the points out here, all the xy points out here are solutions to that particular inequality. All right, so that's the concept, is you draw either dashed line or solid line and then shade above or below it. Okay, so let's try a few more examples, make sure we got the hang of this. Okay, so this one starts a little different. So see if you can figure out, if I want to graph this, what would be different here. Okay, and hopefully you'd figure out that to actually graph, you want it in y equals form first, right? Because we want to graph a line, and so the easiest way to graph a line is graph it in y equals mx plus b. So in this case, we would start with adding 1 to both sides. Okay, and so now we can graph like normal, right? So we're going to have a y-intercept of 1, a slope of -2, so I go down 2, right 1, down 2, right 1. Okay, and then before I draw my line, I got to think, am I going to draw a solid line or a dashed line? Okay, so do the points on the line count? And in this case, they do because there is an equal sign, right? So when we make our line, we are going to make a solid line. Okay, so I'm going to draw a solid line cutting through those points. Okay, then from there we have to determine how to shade. So we're going to shade either above or below the line, right? Because this is where the points are equal. This y equals -2x plus 1. That's where they're equal. What we actually want to do, besides being equal, we can be y values below that. Okay, so because we're below, these are small y values, so the low y values are down here, right? So we go below the line down into the lower y values and we shade all of those points. Okay, so with a solid line and then graphed below it. All right, next one has a twist. Okay, so I'm going to have you write this one down, draw another corner plane, get ready to graph it, and see if you can figure out what's different between this example and the previous one. All right, so hopefully what you realize is that this one has an absolute value. Okay, so the previous example, we graphed a line because this was a regular like y equals mx plus b with no absolute value. All right, so we got to think back. All right, how do we graph absolute value? This is the last section, 2.7. Okay, and so the idea is that the basic parent shape is just a V, right? So it would start at 0, 0 and have the basic V. So I'm going to draw this lightly because this really isn't our answer, but that's what the basic absolute value looks like. So we're just going to shift that shape, right? So see if you can remember how do these shift. We're not going to be at 0, 0 to start our V. We're going to be at a different spot. Right, so hopefully you figured out that this goes down 3. And this one here, instead of going right 3, right 4, sorry, like we think, that one's actually going to go left 4. Okay, so when we do our graph here, instead of starting at 0, 0, we're going to draw a point left 4 and down 3. So there's my center. And then the slope is just 1. There's no number up here, so we just draw a regular 1 slope V shape. So I'm going to draw going that way and then draw the V going back the other way. There's our absolute value. Oh, and I made a mistake, right? So maybe pause the video here and see if you can see my mistake. Okay, so hopefully what you figured out is that my mistake here is that these should be dashed lines, right? Because this is just a less than symbol right here. I should be drawing dashed lines, not solid lines. All right, so let's see if I can go back and fix that. Take those away. Get out dash lines. Okay, and if you forget that, you can just, either erase them on your page, or sometimes I just write dash next to it to let the world know that I messed up and the line should have been dashed. But anyways, okay, now I got a dash line. Final step is to shade above or below it. So in this particular example, the mouth is facing away from y, its y is less than, so we have little y values. So we're going to shade everything down here. These are all the points where y is less than this absolute value statement. All right, one more graph example. All right, I encourage you again to pause, write this down, try it first, and then watch the video. I think you'll learn so much more by trying it first, even if you can't get it right. Think about the parts you do know, like what kind of line is it going to be? It's going to be a V, it's going to be a line. Yeah, so go ahead and give it a shot. All right, I'm back with you. So first thing I always think is this is going to be a V shape, right? Because it has absolute value, it's going to be a V. right? And what's different is we have this weird 3 here, right? So before we do anything else, we want to write the equation so that it looks like a regular absolute value where just y is on that side. Okay, so we have to do some algebra steps here to order to achieve that. So the first one is to just subtract the 3 from both sides. So we get negative y less than absolute value of x plus 2. And then we're going to slap the minus 3 on the outside. And we're going to take that whole statement and minus 3 from it. All right, this is like a negative 1 in front of y. So to get rid of that, we're going to divide by negative 1. Okay, and so I'm going to get y on this side. And then we're going to have like a negative 1 in front of the absolute value. And then the negative 3 is going to flip to a plus 3. Okay, so that's what that side looks like after you divide by negative 1. All right, real important here. There's one other thing I got to remember, right, which is when you solve an inequality and you divide or multiply with a negative, so here we divide by negative 1, the inequality sign flips. So this sign is actually going to be back in that direction. So I typed out my equation out here because I have such a hard time writing it with my pen here. So this is what we need to graph now, right, our absolute value shape. Okay, so hopefully we're getting good at these shifts. Instead of being at 0, 0, this is going to go up 3, and this is inside is left to right, opposite of what we think. So instead of being right 2, that's left by 2. All right, so I'm going to go left 2, up 3. Okay, and then this negative 1 in front means instead of a V going upwards, we're going to draw a downwards facing V. Okay, and also I'm going to try and remember this time, this is going to have to be a dashed V because of there's no equal to on the bottom of this. Right, so I'm going to draw a dash V going down with a slope of 1. Okay, and then the final step is to shade above or below that. All right, and so because y is big, right, the mouth is eating y, we want to be above the V up here. So we're going to shade in all this area, and all of these points up here are the solutions to this particular inequality. All right, really the final part we have then is there's going to be some homework examples that have us go backwards. In this case, we took the inequality and made the graph. So they're going to have a few examples where it's the reverse. So they give us the graph and we have to write the inequality. Okay, so here's a graph, and our goal is to get the inequality for this. Right, so again, I'd pause the video and think of everything you know, what's going to be true about this inequality, right? Is it going to have a equal to symbol or not? Is it going to be y, the mouth going to be facing y or away from y? Okay, so what we got to know here is this is going to be an absolute value because it's a v, right? If it was a straight line, it would be an mx plus b equation, but because it has the v, it's going to be an absolute value equation. So I can set that up already. I'm going to do y an absolute value. Okay, and then I also know I got to go shift to the left 3, right? Instead of being here, I went left by 3. Okay, so I can do an x plus 3 inside of here to make it go left 3. And then let's see, what else do we know? Okay, so we're shaded above it, right? So that means the absolute value sign would be facing y because y is some big value. Okay, and then I think the final piece of this one is because it's a solid line, we'll have an equal to here. All right, and I think that covers everything. All right, there's no up or down, so I don't have any number on the back, and the slope is just 1, so this number here is just 1. All right, I believe that is it. All right, so this section is about graphing inequalities, all right, with 2 variables. A huge thing to remember is when you do this 2.8 section, there's 2 possible graphs, right? There's V graphs like this example here because it has absolute value, okay? And then there'll also be ones where you just draw a straight line, right? The second example doesn't have absolute value. It's just a slope of 3 and y-intercept of 8. You graph it like a regular line and then shade above or below it. Okay.